The average in the final quarter of the 20th century was 66%. And then, thanks to the cheerleading of great central bankers like Alan Greenspan, we discovered the joys of being able to lever asset bubbles and spend beyond our means for about a dozen years. And so the consumption share of GDP shot up about 5 to 6 percentage points above its norm, and it's still there today. Unsupported by income, that's what the chart, excuse me, in the upper right shows you. The black line is the current income cycle, roughly 1.5 trillion below the dash line, which is earlier income cycles. The consumption binge was supported by two bubbles, property and credit, both of which have now burst. The story for the biggest consumer in the world, looking forward, I don't know if you want to call it a reset, mean reversion, you come up with a name, that line's going back down to where it was before we went down this road of binge buying, unsupported by the fundamentals of income and completely supported by the excesses of two bubbles that have now burst. Big story for the world, big story for countries in Asia that are dependent on the American consumer. And that's what this chart shows you right here. If you want two things to think about in terms of gazing eastward, this adds up all the economies in developing Asia, looks at two shares, the black line, the export share, which prior to the global downturn of 08 and 09 had never been higher, and the red line, the share going to internal private consumption, which as we speak has never been lower. This is an export-led region, make no mistake about it. Look at this region coming out of the Asian financial crisis, 97, 98. The export share of the region at that point was about 35%. 10 years later, it was 10 points higher. So when the you-know-what hit the fan in 08 and 09, global trade collapsed, every single region, economy in the region either went into recession or experienced a sharp slowdown. Decoupling, don't count on it, not for a second. Now the region is growing at a much faster speed for some unique features associated with the regions. Savings flows and their willingness to step up and use very aggressive, proactive investment stimulus to deal with the external demand shock. Let's get more specific on this region, especially China. China is a place where I've spent a lot of my time over the last 15 years. I lived there for the last 3 years. And what was not mentioned in my introduction, not only am I still working at, what's that company? Morgan Stanley, where I've been now for 28 years. I've also accepted a position on the faculty. Am I allowed to mention this university down here at UVA? No? All right, it's located in New Haven, Connecticut. And I'm teaching a course at Yale on China. And believe me, there's a lot of interest at our major universities about China. And the course is called The Next China. It's being offered to undergrads in Yale College as well as graduate students in their international relations and School of Management program. And I didn't really know what I was getting into. I figured, I knew a lot about China. They recruited me to go teach a course on China. They said, you could do this in your sleep. And then, I will admit the first 3 or 4 lectures I did do in my sleep, and then I woke up after 2 weeks and I go, oh my God, what am I going to talk about now? I got 20 more classes to teach. And I want to tell you, I've worked hard all my life on Wall Street, but nothing prepared me for what you professors have to do to teach 25 lectures on something you know a lot about. This has been quite a ride. Monday morning, I'm giving an in-depth analysis of the challenges and opportunities in rural China, and I want to tell you, I got a lot of work to do between now and Monday morning. I don't know anything about rural China. But it's been an experience, and when I showed up the first day to teach this course on September the 1st, they gave me this huge lecture hall. It's larger than this room here. I go like, what is going on? It's in the law school, and 280 kids showed up, and it was at that point the largest enrollment for an undergraduate course for a new undergraduate course that they'd had at Yale. We had to throw 100 kids out. It was too many, and there's a lot of interest in what's going on in today's China. This is the framework that I use to lay out the structure of the next China. The old model's on the left, 30 years of 10% growth driven by two sectors, in exports, the red line, fixed investment, the black line. Back in 1979, post-Cultural Revolution, these two sectors collectively were about 35% of Chinese GDP. They doubled over 30 years, doubled. I mean, at their peak in mid-07, they were about 75% of Chinese GDP. Meanwhile, on the right was a sector that stayed behind, the Chinese consumer, which fell to a record low of 35% of GDP in 08, climbed to 36% in 09. The challenge for China is enormous over the next 3 to 5 years, and you can see why. Courtesy of the great crisis of 08 and 09, the red line collapsed. The export share went from the mid-30s below into the mid-20s. And in a short span of 7 months, this economy went into the functional equivalent of a full-blown recession. Exports were growing plus 26% year on year, July of 08. 7 months later, February of 09, the plus 26 had become a minus 27. Over 20 million migrant workers lost their jobs in export-led Guangdong province, and the GDP growth as we measured in China sequentially, quarter to quarter, slowed to zero. This is a recession. So the government panicked, and they put a lot of juice into the black line on the left, and by the end of last year, the economy was, going ahead, full bore again, 10 to 11% growth, and the investment sector of the Chinese economy had risen to the unheard of level of 47% of Chinese GDP. The challenge for China is to recognize they can't keep doing this. In a post-crisis world, the red line is not going to get support from external demand if anything I told you about the U.S. or alluded to in the American consumer is correct. And so the challenge here is to put in place policies that support the chart on the right, internal private consumption. The Chinese get it. And this quote that I have here from the premier, who made this comment before the crisis of 08 and 09 of a Chinese economy that is unstable, unbalanced, uncoordinated, and ultimately unsustainable, is right on, and is reflective of an ongoing debate that is going on at the highest levels of China as to how to make this model change. It provides a lot of the framework for this course I'm teaching at Yale. The Chinese model is not sustainable for external reasons that I've alluded to, but also for internal reasons. And you can see on the left a stunning chart. China, the leader in terms of Asian and global GDP growth, but the laggard in terms of employment growth. They don't generate enough jobs. Why? Manufacturing-led model driving investment and exports. You guys, this is a business school. You know the recipe for productivity growth in manufacturing. It's capital labor substitution. So you end up with a labor-saving growth model. When you have a labor-saving growth model and you have so much surplus labor to absorb, you need to grow your GDP more rapidly to absorb that surplus labor and avoid the thing that China wants to avoid the most, social instability. They also have hugely inefficient production technologies in terms of resource consumption. So since they have to grow their GDP at 10 to absorb the surplus labor, they gobble up an enormous, disproportionate share of the world's natural resources, which leads to horrific environmental degradation and pollution. Sustainable, not on your life. The key to the next China is to come up with more of a labor-intensive, resource-efficient model. And I do believe that one of China's smallest sectors, the services sector, will play a key role in driving that outcome. You can see on your left, the services piece of the Chinese economy is small. Latest numbers put it at 42% last year. Compare that with India, 58, America, 75. On the right, I don't have time to go through this, but it just gives you an example of how different the structure of Chinese employment is with the world's quintessential service economy, the United States. If you just look at 4 lines there, wholesale and retail trade, healthcare, hospitality and leisure, professional and business services, you add them up, America today employs 47 million more people than the Chinese do in those 4 industry groupings alone. Services are going to be an important part of the next China. This is the agenda that I think the government will embrace and adopt in the recently approved 12th five-year plan that was approved by the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party 2 weeks ago. And we haven't seen the full details yet, but there will be 3 key macro goals that I think will be embraced in this new 5-year plan that will really shift the model from that first chart I showed you on China on the left to the chart on the right. The goals are to reduce excess saving by households, to stimulate